The second day of the symposium began with bad news. Jake could see it on Vexstar's face as the Centauri scientist took the stage. The alien leader looked tired, and his usual confident smile was gone. "Honored colleagues," Vexstar began, his musical voice sounding strained. "Before we continue with today's presentations, I must update you on our current situation. Our power crisis has worsened during the night. We now have 47 districts operating on emergency power only." A murmur went through the Great Hall. Jake looked around and saw worried expressions on faces from dozens of different worlds. Even the aliens who had seemed bored yesterday were now paying attention. "However," Vexstar continued, "I am confident that the brilliant minds gathered here will provide us with the solution we need. Today we will hear presentations from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The first presentation was from the Hegemony of Worlds. Their scientists, a tall being with 6 arms, explained how they could build a network of orbital power. Collectors. The collectors would gather energy from their sun and beam it down to the planet using focused radiation. This system would provide unlimited clean energy," the scientists explained. "Construction would take approximately 18 months, and the total cost will be manageable for a civilization of your advanced status." Jake watched the faces of the Centauri leaders in the front row. They were trying to look interested, but he could see the desperation in their eyes. 80 months was too long. Their people were suffering now. The second presentation was even more elaborate. A team from the Crystal Confederacy had designed a system that would tap into the energy of the planet's magnetic field. They showed beautiful holographic models of crystalline structures that would be built at the planet's magnetic poles. These structures would harmonize with the natural energy flows of your world, the lead scientist explained. The system would be completely sustainable and would last for millions of years. "How long will construction take?" asked a Centauri in the audience. "Approximately 2 years for the basic system, with additional enhancements possible over the following decades." Jake saw several Centauri leaders exchange worried glances. 2 years was even worse than 18 months. He wondered how much longer their current systems could hold out. The third presentation was the most ambitious yet. The Temporal Sciences Institute proposed using time manipulation technology to accelerate the planet's natural energy production. They could make the planet's core spin faster, generating more heat and power. This would increase your planet's energy output by 300%, the lead scientist explained. The process would take only 6 months to implement. "What are the risks?" Vexstar asked. "Minimal. There is only a 12% chance of catastrophic planetary disruption." Jake almost laughed out loud. They were talking about a 12% chance of destroying the entire planet, and they called that minimal risk. But the Centauri scientists were nodding thoughtfully, as if this was a reasonable option. The morning session ended with more presentations about exotic technologies and theoretical solutions. Every proposal was impressive, but everyone would take months or years to implement. Jake kept thinking about the dark districts he had seen, the children sitting outside their hot schools, the patients waiting in powerless hospitals. During lunch, Jake overheard a conversation between 2 Centauri officials. Dr. Walsh was nearby, translating their words quietly. "The Emergency Council is meeting tonight," one of them was saying. "They are discussing evacuation protocols." "How many ships will we need?" the other asked. "To evacuate the critical districts, at least 2,000 vessels. But we only have 300 transport ships available." Jake felt his heart sink. The Centauri were seriously considering abandoning parts of their own planet because they could not solve their power problem. He thought about the families he had seen living in the dark districts, the ordinary people who would be left behind. The afternoon session began with Vexstar looking even more stressed than before. "We have received 3 excellent proposals this morning," he announced. "Our technical teams are evaluating each option carefully." But Jake knew that the Centauri did not have time for careful evaluation. Every hour they delayed, more of their systems failed. He had been watching the power grid displays around the hall, and the situation was getting worse by the minute. The next presentation was from the Builders Guild. They proposed constructing a massive ring around the planet that would collect solar energy and distribute it through orbital stations. The ring would be made of materials that did not exist naturally and would require new manufacturing techniques. This project would be the greatest engineering achievement in galactic history, the presenter said proudly. Construction time would be 5 years, but the result would be worth the wait. 5 years. Jake looked at the Centauri leaders and saw that they were barely holding themselves together. Their civilization would collapse long before 5 years passed. The final presentation of the day was from the Energy Manipulation Cores. They wanted to open a permanent gateway to a dimension made entirely of pure energy. The gateway would provide unlimited power, but it would require building a containment facility the size of a small moon. The risks are acceptable, the presenter explained. There is only a small chance that the energy dimension would leak into our reality and destroy everything within a few light years. Jake had heard enough. These aliens were so focused on building amazing new technologies that they had forgotten about helping people. They were talking about projects that would take years while Centauri citizens were suffering today. As the presentation ended, Vextara stood up again. Thank you all for these remarkable proposals. We will now have a brief discussion period before our technical teams begin their final evaluations. After careful consideration, Vextara continued, we have narrowed our options to 3 primary approaches. The orbital collector network, the magnetic field tap, and the dimensional gateway project all show promise. Jake felt his frustration growing. 3 approaches that would take years to build while people sat in darkness outside. We estimate that implementation of our chosen solution will begin within 6 months, Vextara said. We are confident that our civilization can maintain emergency operations until then. 6 months? Jake had seen the power grid displays. The Centauri systems were failing faster every day. They will be lucky to last 6 weeks, let alone 6 months. We will now open the floor for questions and brief comments, Vextara announced. Great Hall was quiet. No one seemed to have anything to add to the brilliant presentations they had heard. Jake looked around at thousands of the galaxy's smartest beings, all of them apparently satisfied with solutions that would take years to implement. Jake felt something building up inside him. These aliens were so smart, so advanced, so sure of themselves, but they were wrong. They were missing something obvious, something that a human engineer could see, but they could not. His hands started to rise before he realized what he was doing. Around him, other humans looked shocked. Dr. Carson grabbed his arm. Jake, what are you doing? Carson whispered. Someone has to say something, Jake whispered back. They are making a mistake. The Great Hall was becoming quiet as beings noticed. The human raising his hand. Jake could feel thousands of eyes turning toward him. His heart was pounding, but he kept his hand up. Vextara looked surprised and a little embarrassed. In the history of the Grand Symposium, no observer had ever asked to speak. The very idea was strange and uncomfortable. Yes, honored observer, Vextara said, his voice uncertain. Jake stood up slowly. His legs felt weak, but he managed to stay upright. I would like to make a brief comment about the power grid problem, if I may. A ripple of surprise went through the hall. Some aliens were making sounds that Dr. Walsh later told him were the equivalent of nervous laughter. Others looked curious. A few looked annoyed that a primitive being was wasting their time. I suppose that would be acceptable, Vextara said. Please keep your comments brief. Jake took a deep breath. He was about to do something that no human had ever done before. He was about to tell the smartest beings in the galaxy that they were wrong. Jake could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the power grid displays from the symposium. The patterns kept running through his mind like a puzzle that was almost solved, but not quite. He got up and walked to his window to look out at the city. More sections were dark now. Whole districts that had been glowing yesterday were now black against the night sky. Jake could see small lights moving through the dark areas, probably Zentari citizens using portable lights to move around their powerless neighborhoods. This is getting serious, he said to himself. Dr. Carson was awake too. Jake found him in the common area, reading reports on his tablet. I cannot stop thinking about what we saw today, Carson said when Jake sat down. The Zentari are brilliant, but they seem to be missing something obvious. What do you mean? They are trying to solve their power crisis by building new power sources, but from what I could see, they have plenty of power. The problem is getting it to where it needs to go. Jake looked at Carson with surprise. You noticed that too? I am not an engineer like you, but I have studied many civilizations. Sometimes the most advanced cultures become so focused on complexity that they forget about simple solutions. Jake nodded. It is like they have forgotten how to think practically. Everything has to be a masterpiece of engineering instead of something that just works. The next morning, Jake asked Vexstar if he could walk through the city to see more of their civilization. The Zentari scientists seemed pleased by the request. Of course, honored observer, we are proud to show you our achievements. Captain Brooks decided to come along. I want to see how ordinary Zentari live, she said. Yesterday, we only saw the fancy conference areas. Krelver was assigned to be their guide again. As they walked through the city, Jake asked lots of questions about the power systems. He wanted to understand how the Zentari had built their infrastructure. Our power grid is the most advanced in the galaxy, Krelver explained proudly. It was designed by our greatest engineers over many centuries. Every component is perfectly optimized for maximum efficiency. They walked through a residential district where families lived in beautiful buildings that seemed to grow out of the ground like crystal trees. But many of the buildings were dark, and Jake could see Zentari citizens sitting outside because their homes were too hot without air conditioning. How long had these buildings been without power? Captain Brooks asked. Only 3 days, Krelver replied, but he sounded embarrassed. The symposium will find a solution soon. Jake stopped walking and looked up at the buildings. He could see thick cables running between them, carrying power from one section to another. But some of the cables were dark, meaning no power was flowing through them. Can I see your power distribution center? Jake asked. Krelver looked confused. Why? Would you want to see that? It is just a technical facility. I am curious about how your systems work, Jake said. On Earth, I spent a lot of time in power plants and distribution centers. Very well, Krelver said. But I must warn you, our technology is quite advanced. You may not understand it. The power distribution center was a massive building filled with humming machinery. Jake had never seen anything like it. The Zentari systems were beautiful. Everything was made of the same crystal-like material, and energy flowed through transparent tubes that glowed with different colors. A Zentari engineer named Zafara gave them a tour. She was proud of the facility and explained every detail. This center controls power distribution for 12 districts, she said. We can monitor every building and adjust power flow with perfect precision. Jake listened carefully and asked questions about how the system worked. The more he learned, the more he understood the problem. The Zentari system was incredibly sophisticated, but it was not flexible. Every part was designed to work in perfect harmony with every other part. What happens if one section fails? Jake asked. The system automatically shuts down that section. To prevent damage, Zafar replied. It is a safety feature. But then the people in that section lose power? Yes, but only temporarily. The system will redistribute power once the problem is fixed. Jake looked at the control displays. They showed dozens of sections that were shut down, waiting for repairs. How long does it usually take to fix a section? Zafara. Expression became uncomfortable, usually a few hours. But recently, we have had many failures at once. Our repair teams are working as fast as they can. Captain Brooks was studying the displays too. It looks like your backup systems are overloaded, she said. The sections that are still working are carrying too much power. That is correct, Zafar admitted. We are pushing our systems beyond their normal limits. But our engineers assure, use that this is safe for a short time. Jake was starting to understand the real problem. The Centauri had built a system that was perfect for normal conditions, but it could not handle emergencies. When parts failed, the system became less and less stable until it started shutting down more and more sections. As they walked back through the city, Jake saw the human problems getting worse. They passed a school where children were sitting outside because their building was too hot. They saw a medical clinic that was running on emergency power, with patients waiting in long lines. This is a humanitarian crisis, Captain Brooks said. Quietly, these people need help now, not in 2 years when the scientists finish building their exotic power systems. Jake agreed. The Centauri were so focused on finding the perfect solution that they were ignoring the immediate suffering of their people. It reminded him of something his old boss used to say: sometimes the best solution is the one that works today, not the one that works perfectly tomorrow. That evening, Jake asked Vextar if he could access the Centauri technical databases. I would like to learn more about your power systems, he said. It might help me understand the presentations at the symposium. Vextara seemed pleased by Jake's interest. Of course, honored observer. I will give you access to our public technical files, though I should warn you, our systems are quite complex. Jake spent the entire night reading through the Centauri technical documentation. Their power grid was indeed incredibly sophisticated. They had built redundant systems, automated controls, and self-monitoring networks that were far beyond anything humans had created. But as Jake studied the diagrams and specifications, he kept coming back to the same conclusion. The Centauri had over-engineered their system. They had made it so complex that it was brittle. When something went wrong, the system could not adapt. Dr. Carson found Jake in the morning, still reading technical manuals. You've been up all night, Carson said. Did you learn anything useful? I think I understand their problem, Jake replied. The Centauri have forgotten something important about engineering. What is that? The best system is not the most elegant one. The best system is the one that keeps working when everything goes wrong. Jake explained what he had learned. The Centauri power grid was like a beautiful watch. Every piece was perfectly crafted and worked together perfectly. But if one small part broke, the whole watch stopped working. Human power grids are different, Jake said. We built them to be tough and flexible because we knew they would break down. We have backup systems for our backup systems, and we can reroute power in dozens of different ways. So you think you could fix their power problem? Dr. Carson asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. Maybe, but they would have to be willing to accept a solution that is not perfect. They would have to be willing to use their existing systems in ways they were not designed for. Do you think they would listen to a human engineer? Jake looked out the window at the city. More sections were dark today. The crisis was getting worse, and the symposium was still focused on long-term solutions. That would take years to build. I do not know, Jake said, but I think they are running out of time. If someone does not do something soon, their whole civilization might collapse. The second day of the symposium would begin in a few hours. Jake wondered if he would have the courage to speak up when the time came. He was just a human engineer who fixed coffee machines. But maybe that was exactly what the Centauri needed. Someone who understood that sometimes the simple solution was the right solution. Jake woke up early on the morning of the symposium. He had not slept well because the guest quarters kept losing power during the night. Every few hours, the lights would flicker and die, then come back on with a low humming sound. He wondered how the Centauri could sleep through such interruptions. Dr. Carson was already awake and sitting by the window when Jake came out of his room. The older scientist was staring at the city below with a worried expression. The power problems are getting worse, Carson said without looking up. 3 more districts went dark during the night. That floating tower over there has been running on emergency power for 2 days. Jake looked where Carson was pointing. The tower was still beautiful, but its usual bright glow was replaced by a dim red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. How can they have such advanced technology but still have power problems? Jake asked. Maybe their technology is too advanced, Captain Brooks said as she joined them. Sometimes when you build something very complicated, it becomes harder to fix when it breaks. A Zentari escort arrived to take them to the symposium. His name was Krelver, and he was younger than the other Zentari they had met. He seemed nervous about something, though he tried to hide it with polite conversation. The Grand Symposium is our most important event, Krelver explained as they walked through the city. The greatest minds from 47 different worlds will present their research. We are honored to have observers from so many developing civilizations. Jake noticed the slip, but said nothing. He was getting used to being called primitive by aliens who thought humans were still learning to use fire. The symposium was held in a massive building that looked like it was made of pure crystal. The structure rose up from the center of the city like a mountain of light. Jake had never seen anything so impressive. The building was so big that it had its own weather system, with clouds forming near the top dot inside. The main hall was even more amazing. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. Thousands of seats were arranged in perfect circles around a central stage. Each seat was filled with an alien from a different world. Jake saw creatures with tentacles, others with wings, and some that looked like walking trees. There are over 10,000 beings here, Dr. Carson whispered. This is the largest gathering of intelligent life in the galaxy. The human delegation was seated in a section marked Primitive Observers. Jake was not offended by the label. He was too busy looking around at all the different aliens. Some were taking notes on devices that floated in the air. Others were communicating with lights that flashed on their skin. Dr. Amy Walsh, a human language expert who had joined them for the symposium, sat next to Jake. She was already working on translating the conversations around them. The aliens are talking about the power crisis, she whispered. They are trying to sound calm, but many of them are worried. Chief Scientist Vexara took the stage, and the huge hall became quiet. His voice was amplified so that everyone could hear him clearly. Welcome, honored colleagues, to the 847th Grand Symposium of Galactic Sciences. Today we gather to share knowledge and solve the challenges that face our civilizations. The first presentation was about quantum energy manipulation. A scientist from the Karathi Empire explained how they could create power by folding space-time into small pockets. Jake tried to follow the explanation, but the mathematics was far beyond anything he had learned. The other aliens in the audience seemed to understand it perfectly and asked detailed questions. The second presentation was even more complex. A team from the Velian Confederacy had designed a system that could harvest energy from parallel dimensions. They showed holographic models of machines that existed in multiple realities at the same time. Jake's head started to hurt just thinking about it. These solutions are incredible, Dr. Carson whispered. The level of theoretical knowledge required to build such systems is beyond human understanding. But are they practical? Jake asked quietly. How long would it take to build one of these machines? Dr. Walsh had been listening to the alien conversations around them. The Karathi system would take about 2 years to construct, she whispered back. The Velian system would take even longer because they need to find the right dimensional frequencies. Jake looked around the hall and noticed something interesting. While the scientists on stage were presenting their amazing theories, many of the aliens in the audience looked tired and frustrated. Some of them kept checking small devices that Jake guessed were communication tools. The third presentation was about exotic matter reactors. The scientists showed how they could use materials that existed only in the hearts of dying stars to create unlimited energy. The presentation was beautiful and the mathematics was perfect, but Jake found himself thinking about something else. How are they going to get the exotic matter? He asked Dr. Carson. They would need to send ships to collect it from stellar cores, Carson replied. It would be very dangerous and expensive. And how long would that take? Probably several years. Maybe decades. Jake nodded but kept his thoughts to himself. All these solutions were impressive, but they were not helping the Zentari people who were sitting in the dark right now. During the lunch break, Jake walked around the city with Captain Brooks. The power problems were getting worse. They saw Zentari citizens standing in long lines at charging stations, trying to power their personal devices. Restaurants were closed because their food preparation systems were not working. Transportation. Pods sat empty on their tracks. Look at this, Captain Brooks said, pointing to a hospital. They are running on backup power, but you can see the lights flickering. What happens if the backup systems fail? Jake was thinking the same thing. The Zentari were having a real crisis, but their best scientists were focused on building new types of power systems that would take years to complete. It was like trying to put out a fire by inventing a new type of water dot. They returned to the symposium for the afternoon sessions. The presentations continued to be impressive and completely impractical. One scientist wanted to build a ring around the planet to collect solar energy. Another proposed drill into the planet's core to tap into its natural heat. A third suggested moving the entire civilization to a different planet with better energy sources. Jake watched Vexar's face during each presentation. The Zentari leader was trying to look interested and hopeful, but Jake could see the desperation in his eyes. The scientist knew that none of these solutions would help his people who were suffering right now. The Zentari are in real trouble, Dr. Walsh whispered. I have been listening to their private conversations. Some of their leaders are talking about evacuation plans. Evacuation? Jake asked quietly. They are considering moving their population to other worlds until they can solve the power crisis. But that would take months, and they are not sure their systems can last that long. As the day went on, Jake found himself paying less attention to the presentations and more attention to the technical displays around the hall. The Zentari had set up screens showing their current power grid status. The displays were meant to demonstrate the complexity of their systems, but Jake saw them as diagnostic tools. He studied the power flow patterns, the distribution networks, and the backup system configurations. The more he looked, the more he understood about their problem. The Zentari had built an incredibly sophisticated system, but it was not flexible. When part of it failed, the whole system became unstable. Their problem is not that they need more power, Jake realized. Their problem is that they cannot move the power they have to where it is needed. The symposium ended for the day with Vextar announcing that they would spend the evening reviewing all the proposals. He thanked everyone for their brilliant contributions and promised that a solution would be found soon. As the aliens filed out of the crystal hall, Jake remained in his seat, staring at the power grid displays. Captain Brooks and Dr. Carson were discussing the presentations they had heard, but Jake was not listening. He was thinking about power grids and load balancing and the basic engineering principles he had learned fixing broken equipment. Tomorrow will bring more presentations about exotic technologies and theoretical solutions. But Jake was starting to think that the answer to the Zentari's problem might be much simpler than anyone imagined. Jake Miller was fixing a broken coffee machine in his lab when the message arrived. The 34-year-old engineer had grease on his hands and was muttering about cheap parts when his computer started beeping. He wiped his hands on his shirt and walked over to check what was wrong. The screen showed something he had never seen before. A message was coming in from deep space, and it was not from any human ship. Jake sat down slowly and stared at the strange symbols appearing on his screen. His translation program was working hard to make sense of the alien language. This cannot be real, Jake said to himself. He had been working as an engineer for the Earth Colonial Authority for 10 years, but he had never received a message from aliens before. Most humans had never even seen an alien, let alone talk to one. The translation finished, and Jake read the message 3 times before he believed it. The Centauri Collective was inviting him to their homeworld. They wanted him to watch their biggest science meeting of the year. Jake had heard the Centauri before everyone had. They were one of the most advanced alien races in the galaxy. Their technology was so good that other aliens looked up to them. Jake printed the message and ran down the hall to find his boss. Dr. Helen Park was in her office, going through reports about mining operations on Mars. She looked up when Jake burst through her door. "Helen, you need to see this," Jake said, holding out the paper. Dr. Park took the message and read it carefully. Her eyes got wider as she read. "This is from the Centauri Collective. They want to invite you to observe their science conference on Centaura Prime." "I know what it says," Jake replied. "But why me? I'm just an engineer. I fix things in design." "Power systems. Why would the most advanced aliens in the galaxy want me at their science meeting?" Helen stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see the busy spaceport where ships came and went every day. The Centauri have been studying human technology for the past few years. Maybe they are curious about how we do things. Jake laughed. "Our technology is like stone tools compared to theirs. They have ships that can travel between galaxies. We are still trying to figure out how to build better rockets." "Maybe that is exactly why they want you there," Helen said. "Sometimes a fresh perspective can be valuable." 3 days later, Jake was packing his bags for the trip to Centaura Prime. The journey would take 3 weeks on the human research ship called the Horizon's Edge. Captain Lisa Brooks would be in command, and Dr. Pete Carson would come along as the team's alien expert. Jake had never been on a long space journey before. The longest trip he had taken was 2 weeks to Jupiter's moons. 3 weeks in hyperspace was going to be a new experience. He packed his tools, his computer, and several books about alien technology. The Horizon's Edge was not a big ship, but it was comfortable. Jake's room was small, but had everything he needed. Captain Brooks gave him a tour of the ship and introduced him to the crew. There were only 12 people on board, including Jake and Dr. Carson. "So you are the engineer who got invited to the big alien science party," said Captain Brooks with a smile. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. "Any idea why they picked you?" Jake shrugged. "I have been asking myself the same question. I sent them some reports about human power systems last year, but I never expected this." Dr. Carson joined them in the ship's small dining room. He was a thin man with thick glasses who had spent his whole career studying alien cultures. "The Centauri are very formal," he explained. "They do not do anything without a good reason. If they invited you, it means they think you have something valuable to offer. Or they want to study me like a bug under a microscope," Jake replied. The ship jumped into hyperspace the next morning. Jake watched the stars stretch into long lines outside his window, then disappear into the strange purple glow of hyperspace. He had seen it before, but it still amazed him every time. During the journey, Jake spent his time studying everything he could find about the Centauri. Their civilization was over 50,000 years old. They had solved problems that other races could not even understand. Their cities were works of art that floated in the sky. Their ships could travel anywhere in the galaxy in days, but as Jake read more, he started to notice something strange. The Centauri were very good at building complex things, but they seemed to love making things more complicated than they needed to be. Their power systems used exotic materials and required constant maintenance. Their computers needed teams of specialists to operate. "It is like they think the harder something is to build, the better it must be," Jake told Dr. Carson one evening. "That is an interesting observation," Dr. Carson replied. "Many advanced civilizations develop that way. They have so much knowledge that they forget about simple solutions. But simple solutions are often the best ones," Jake said. "I learned that fixing broken equipment for 10 years. Sometimes the problem is just a loose wire or a clogged filter." Captain Brooks laughed. That is very human thinking, Jake. We have always had to make do with less, so we learned to be practical. As the ship got closer to Zentara Prime, Jake started to feel nervous. He was about to meet some of the smartest beings in the galaxy. What if they asked him questions he could not answer? What if they realized he was just a simple engineer who fixed coffee machines? The ship dropped out of hyperspace near a beautiful blue and green planet. Zentara Prime looked like Earth, but with 3 moons hanging in the sky. The planet was covered with cities that sparkled like jewels. Jake could see huge structures floating in the clouds and ships moving between them. "Look at that," whispered Dr. Carson. "Those cities are engineering marvels. Each one houses millions of Zentari." But as Jake looked closer, he noticed something that made him frown. Parts of the cities were dark. Some of the floating structures were not glowing like the others. Are those sections supposed to be dark? "Yes, Doc," Captain Brooks checked her. "Instruments. The Zentari are having some kind of power problem. Our sensors show that about 30% of their cities are experiencing blackouts." "That is strange," Dr. Carson said. "The Zentari have the most advanced power systems in the galaxy. They should not have problems like that." A Zentari ship approached the horizon's edge. It was 3 times bigger than the human ship and shaped like a crystal. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful. The aliens guided them to a landing pad on one of the floating cities. Jake's first sight of a Zentari took his breath away. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow with a soft light. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with a grace that reminded Jake of dancers. Chief Scientist Vextar greeted the human delegation. He spoke perfect English, though with a musical accent that made every word sound like part of a song. "Welcome to Zentara Prime, honored observers. We are pleased that you have accepted our invitation." "Thank you for having us," Captain Brooks replied. "We are honored to be here." As they walked through the city, Jake could not help but notice the problems. Streets were dark where the power was out. Zentari citizens were walking instead of using their usual floating transport. Some buildings were running on backup power that made them dim and flickering. "I hope you do not mind the minor inconveniences," Vextar said when he noticed Jake looking at the dark areas. "We are experiencing some temporary energy distribution challenges. Our symposium will surely provide solutions to these small problems." Jake nodded politely, but he was thinking about what he had seen. The Zentari had the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they were having power problems that looked pretty serious to him. He wondered if their solutions would be as complicated as everything else they built. The next morning, Jake would attend the greatest science conference in the galaxy. He had no idea that in 3 days, you would shock every alien there by solving their planet's biggest crisis in just 7 minutes. The 4th day of what was supposed to be humanity's surrender deadline began with General Lisa Carter making a decision that would change galactic history forever. She stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by displays, showing the complete destruction of the alien ground forces and the retreat of their orbital fleet. "It's time," General Carter announced to her staff. "Activate Operation Deep Strike. Show them what we've really been building out here." Captain Matt Stone, Jake Morrison's second in command, received orders that morning that made him question everything he thought he knew about space. He was told to report to coordinates in the asteroid belt, where Earth supposedly had nothing but a few mining stations. But when his shuttle arrived at the location, Matt discovered the truth was far more incredible. What appeared to be a normal asteroid was actually a camouflaged military base. As Matt's shuttle approached the rock, surface split open to reveal a massive hangar bay filled with spacecraft that looked like they belonged in the distant future. The ships were sleek, black, and covered with technology that seemed to bend light around them. "Welcome to Hidden Fleet Command," said Admiral Kate Rogers as she met Matt at the airlock. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a smile that suggested she knew secrets that could reshape the universe. "I suppose you're wondering how long we've had a fleet out here." Matt stared at the ships around him. Each one was easily twice the size of the largest Zephyrian vessels, and their hulls seemed to be made of some kind of metal that shifted and flowed like liquid. How is this possible? We've never had the technology to build ships like these. We've had this technology for millions of years, Admiral Rogers replied. We just kept it hidden until we needed it. The Zephyrians aren't the first aliens to threaten Earth, and they won't be the last. But they're about to learn why no one has ever successfully conquered our world. The fleet that emerged from hidden bases throughout the solar system was beyond anything the Zephyrians had ever encountered. There were battleships that could phase through solid matter, making them impossible to hit with conventional weapons. There were destroyers equipped with weapons that could manipulate time itself, allowing them to attack enemy ships before the aliens even knew they were under threat. Captain Nina Ross found herself assigned to one of these incredible ships. Vessel was called the Earth's Vengeance, and it was equipped with technology that seemed like magic, even to someone who had seen Earth's advanced fighters. The ship could become invisible, travel faster than light, and fire weapons that could alter the laws of physics in localized areas. All ships, this is Admiral Rogers, came the voice over the communication system. Begin Phase 1 of Operation Deep Strike. Show these aliens what real starships look like. The hidden fleet moved out from their concealed positions throughout the solar system. They had been waiting in asteroid fields, behind moons, and in the depths of space where no one would think to look. Each ship was crewed by humans who had been trained from birth for this moment. They were not just soldiers. They were the elite of Earth Space Navy. Commander Vextu was trying to reorganize his forces when his sensors detected the approaching human fleet. At first, he couldn't believe what his instruments were telling him. The human ships were not just more advanced in Zephyrian technology, they were impossibly advanced. Sir, the human ships are moving at speeds that should be impossible, reported his science officer. They're traveling faster than light, but without using any propulsion system we can detect. That's impossible, Vextol replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Everything about this war had been impossible. The humans had weapons that defied physics, soldiers with superhuman abilities, and now a fleet that seemed to operate by rules that no one else understood. The first human ship to engage the alien fleet was the Earth's Fury, commanded by Captain Tony Blake's cousin, Commander Sarah Blake. Her ship approached a Zephyrian battleship that was 3 times its size and armed, with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. But size meant nothing when you had technology that could rewrite reality. Target acquired, Sarah reported calmly. Engaging temporal displacement cannon. The weapon she fired didn't look like much, just a brief flash of blue light. But what it did was terrifying. The Zephyrian battleship suddenly began moving in reverse, its actions playing backward, as if time itself was unwinding. The ship's crew watched in horror as their vessel was forced to relive the last 10 minutes of their existence in reverse. When the temporal effect ended, the alien ship was exactly where it had been 10 minutes earlier, but its crew was completely disoriented and their weapons were no longer charged. The Earth's Fury then fired conventional weapons that tore the helpless alien ship apart in seconds. One down, Sarah reported, moving to next target. Other human ships were demonstrating equally impossible capabilities. The Earth's Thunder could phase through solid matter, allowing it to appear inside enemy ships and fire from within. The Earth's Lightning could split into multiple copies of itself, confusing alien targeting systems completely. The Earth's Storm could manipulate gravity so precisely that it could tie enemy ships in knots without touching them. Captain Matt Stone was aboard the flagship Earth's Justice when he witnessed the most incredible demonstration yet. The ship's captain, Admiral Rogers herself, decided to show the aliens what humanity's most advanced weapon could do. Prepare the reality anchor, Admiral Rogers ordered. Full power. The reality anchor was a weapon that could change the basic laws of physics in a limited area. When it fired, the space around a group of alien ships suddenly became a place where different rules applied. In that area, energy weapons didn't work, Gravity flowed upward instead of downward, and time moved at half speed. The alien ships caught in the field found themselves helpless. Their weapons wouldn't fire, their engines couldn't push against the reverse gravity, and their crew moved so slowly that they couldn't even think clearly. The human ships moved through the field unaffected, destroying the helpless aliens with ease. "Sir, we need to retreat," the tactical officer told Commander Vextel. "We can't fight weapons like these. They're changing the laws of physics." But retreat was not as simple as it sounded. The human ships were faster than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. Every time an alien ship tried to escape, a human vessel would appear in its path, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Kate Rogers, the Admiral's daughter, was piloting a reconnaissance ship called the Earth's Eye. Her vessel had the ability to predict where enemy ships would try to go and arrive there first. She appeared in front of fleeing alien ships like a ghost, forcing them to turn back toward the main battle. "This is Kate Rogers to all ships," she reported. "The aliens are trying to escape through the outer system. Should I let them go?" "Negative," came Admiral Rogers' reply. "We want them to understand the full extent of our capabilities. Show them the pursuit system." Kate's ship suddenly split into 50 identical copies, each one capable of independent action. The copies spread out across the solar system, creating a net that no fleeing ship could escape. When alien vessels tried to run, they found human ships waiting for them at every possible escape route. "How are they doing this?" Commander Vextel asked desperately. "How can one ship become 50 ships?" His science officer was staring at his instruments in complete confusion. "Sir, I don't think those are illusions. The sensors show 50 separate ships, each one with its own power signature and weapon systems." The truth was even more incredible than the Zephyrians imagined. The human ships were equipped with technology that could manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. They could create temporary copies of themselves, alter their own physical properties, and operate according to laws of physics that the aliens had never discovered. As the battle continued, it became clear that the human fleet was not just winning. They were demonstrating capabilities that no galactic civilization had ever achieved. They could travel through time, manipulate reality, and create weapons that defied all known science. "Sir, we've lost 80% of our fleet," the tactical officer reported to Commander Vextel. "The humans aren't just more advanced than U.S. They're operating with technology that shouldn't be possible." Vextel stared at the display showing his forces being systematically destroyed by weapons he couldn't understand. Ships that could phase through matter, weapons that reverse time, and vessels that could multiply themselves at will. This wasn't just a military defeat. It was a demonstration that humanity possessed knowledge that made the Zephyrian Empire look like children playing with sticks and stones. "Send a message to the human fleet," Vextel ordered quietly. "Tell them we surrender," but Admiral Rogers had other plans. The war was not just about defeating the Zephyrian invasion. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy about what would happen to anyone who threatened Earth.